If you dug around in very many old tackle boxes or been around old vintage and antique fishing equipment, I bet you've come across one of these. Not the hat, the pin. And here's another one. And here's several more. These are Field and Stream honor badges, and that's what this episode of the Shop series is about. I'm going to tell you some stories about how these all came to be. But that's what we do here in the Shop series, is we just talk about stuff that I've collected over the years. Now, I'm not an expert on anything, but I do know just a little bit about some of the stuff that I like, because I always collect stuff that has a personal connection and means something to me. So stay with me on this one, because I got a surprise coming up at the end of this particular segment. But I want to tell you about Field and Stream honor badges. So first of all, let's talk about Field and Stream magazine. Now, Field and Stream magazine had been around for a long time. It was started up in the 1880s, and by mid 1900, by 1910, 1909, something like that, they were the most popular magazine in the nation. Everybody who went fishing read Field and Stream magazine. They knew all about them, and they kept up with them. And that was social media to them back then. You even got fishing reports and stuff in there. It was a great magazine. Well, anyway, fishing was popular at the time, and there was a lot of stuff happening. The major lure manufacturers, the Heddens, the Flugers, the Paw Paws, the Creek Chubs, all those national companies were coming on strong, but there's also some little startup companies that were starting around the country, and that's where Mr. Jamison comes in. So Mr. Jamison, Smiley Jamison, invented a fishing lure that, oh Lord, he was just absolutely certain was the best fishing lure ever invented, and he thought he could prove it. So he took out an ad in Field and Stream magazine, and he said, I've got the best fishing lure in the world, and I'll challenge anybody to come and beat me with it over 3 days of fishing. And put up a reward, $1,000, to do it. And so now $1,000 back then, what's that? That's got to be over $100,000 in today's money. So that was not a little bit of money. He took that ad out in 1909, and it sat there until a year later. Nobody took him up on it. Until this old boy from New Jersey invented him a lure of his own that he thought could beat it. Now, Mr. Jamison's lure was a frog-type lure, and it was, not very long. It looked kind of like a frog made out of cork, had some eyes, it had some felt legs, and it just had one single hook, and it was really good for fishing in the lily pads and the weeds and stuff like that. It's the first one ever invented, the first frog-type bait ever invented, and they're still popular today and still catching fish today. But now, this old boy, his name was Decker from New Jersey. Mr. Decker's lure looked a little different. It was a traditional plug style, but he had a twist to it. And I do mean a twist. Now, here's a picture of it. So, here's the Jamison lure. This is the Jamison coaxer, and that's his frog-type lure. That one's beat up. The legs are gone off of it. It's in bad shape. I don't have one of these. I need to get one. And here is Decker's, and he just called this the Decker bass bait. What do you notice about that? Remember I said there's a twist to it? That's a Whopper Plopper, ain't it? Now, some of these old boys who's buying these Whopper Ploppers, and they think it's the best top water plug ever invented. It's something new. Well, I got news for you. There ain't nothing new under the sun. And that's kind of the whole, idea behind this series, is that if you know where you've been, it's a lot easier to figure out where you're going. And we can learn a lot from these old lures. But anyway, Decker's Whopper Plopper. He didn't call it that, but that's what it was. So he said, Mr. Jameson, I will take you up on your offer, and let's have the contest. And so, according to the rules that Jameson already published in the magazine, he got to pick a spot. And so he picked a lake outside of Chicago, and it was a private lake, and it had a club there. So some of the club members became the judges, and Field and Stream sent journalists out and other people to be judges too, because they were real interested in they announced it in the magazine, and people all around the country were really interested in getting in on finding out what was happening with that contest. So sure enough, they set out one summer. It had to be summer because it was outside of Chicago, and all the lakes is froze up there now. But in the summer, they set out, and this was in 1910. And they had their contest, and they went to fishing. They both fished in the same boat. I don't know if they probably didn't have enough motor or nothing. They just paddled around. And they probably had a judge in there with them, or people watching them anyway. So they all caught fish, and they caught fish every day. So come to the end of the third day, and they tallied everything up and figured out who won the contest. And guess what? Sure enough, Mr. Jameson won the contest. So he got to keep his $1,000. But wait a minute. Mr. Decker wasn't having none of it. He was like, yep, you beat me fair and square. That's right, because you made the rules. But guess what? Every fish I caught was bigger. And he was right. He caught bigger fish. He caught fewer fish, but he caught bigger fish. So, I'm a fisherman, and I bet you are too if you're watching this. Which day would you rather have, more fish or bigger fish? That's the question, ain't it? I usually would go toward the bigger fish, but, your mileage may vary, so whatever you think. But anyway, Mr. Decker, he made some money off of his lure, and so did Mr. Jameson, and so did Field and Stream. In fact, so much money, they liked this contest thing, and they claimed that to be the first official bass tournament. Now, I think people been, competing. If you're a fisherman, you're competitive, and you brag about your big fish, and if you're fishing with a buddy, you're going to rub it in his face all the way home, tell him about the big fish you caught, right? If it's bigger than the one he caught. Unless he caught the bigger one, then you're going to rub it in your face. So that's what we do. But anyway, they claim this to be the very, very first bass tournament. And so Field and Stream decided to have their own contest, and they put out some rules, and you had to send in, an affidavit signed with witnesses and notarized saying that you caught the fish, and they gave away trophies for a while. Well, those trophies got pretty expensive. They had about 20 species, so during the 1930s, they decided to move to a pin. And so they also were given these pins. They decided to give these pins not just to the biggest fish in the country or that people had sent in, but also they set some minimum standards. For example, largemouth bass of 7 pounds would get a pin. You just had to fill out the affidavit, have 2 witnesses, and have it notarized and send it in, and then they'd send you the pin. Well, as you can imagine, these were very, very popular, and people were collecting them back then, and they still collect them today. And so lots of them made. So they decided to expand the contest even more, and then they had the first, second, and third prize. First being gold, the second silver, and the third place was bronze. And the bronze was the same color as the honor badges, and you can see them again here. So here's an interesting one. Here's an award badge, and it's gold. First place. Here's another one, award badge, and that's a rockfish, and it's gold. First place. And on the back, it'll tell you how big the fish is. They stamped it on the back. That's a rockfish, and it's 55 pounds. That's a nice rockfish. That's a nice rockfish anytime, especially back when that one was caught. So that's how it worked. And so I told you that I collect stuff that's personal to me, and here's why. So right below here, this is a copy of a certificate that my brother has, the original. So my dad kept a scrapbook, a fishing scrapbook, and he put every picture of, the big fish that he caught in there. And he also put this particular certificate in there. And, as kids, anytime our neighbors would come over to the house or somebody new would come over, we'd brag about our fishing. And then we'd especially brag about, the biggest fish that we've caught. And we'd show the pictures in that magazine. When that was social media, it's like the bait shop wall. That was our bait shop wall in the house, was that scrapbook. And my brother Craig still has it, and my wife made a copy of it. But here's a Field and Stream 53rd Annual Fishing Contest. And it is dated October 26, 1963. First prize. This is to certify that Jason C. Kimbrough of Gainesville, Tennessee, on the date below, did catch and successfully land a largemouth bass, 14 pounds and 1 ounce. Now, that's a nice bass anytime, and especially a nice bass in 1963. And it goes on to say it was 2 feet 4 inches, 28 inches, and caught it on 12-pound test line. They kept these. And so my dad got his pen, and I don't have his pen, and I don't know, my brother Craig may have it, but I have some like it, and I've tried to duplicate it because my dad would wear that pen on every hat that he ever had. And if I went through the magazine here, there's a picture of him, but if I go through there's another picture of a big bass. If I go through this, you'll notice that, I don't know if you can see that, but he's wearing a pen. Wearing the pen, He wore that pen all the time. And to this day, anytime I get a floppy hat, a hat with a brim on it, here's another. I got another one up there. It's going to have a Field and Stream Honor badge on there. And the reason for that is just because my dad did it. And there's a little bit of superstition to it. But it's also just to honor the tradition, And there's something to be said for that. So they quit making these Field and Stream Honor badges in the 1970s, like 1977. But from 1937 to 1977, what's that, 40 years? They were going on. So there's a lot of them out there, and they're still very collectible. Back during the pandemic, you couldn't buy one for less than $75, but now you can find them for $30-40 online, and especially the more rare ones. Now, eventually they started making them for animals, for hunters, for ducks and deer and elk and all that stuff, and they even did them for skeet shooting. And they had standards for skeet shooting, and that was pretty interesting too. But if you come by some, hit me up, and I'll tell you if they're worth anything, if they're one of the more rare ones. And might even make you an offer on it at some point. I promised a surprise. So, and by the way, thank you for watching, and please subscribe if you hadn't already, and your likes are so appreciated, and your shares. If you got any questions, send them my way. But here's a surprise. So the Field and Stream Company's been gone for a while. They sold their logo to Dick's Sporting Goods, and you can still buy a shirt there with Field and Stream on it. But the publishing rights belong to somebody else. Well, these two country music singers in Nashville just bought it. And guess what? They're bringing back the magazine. They just announced it last week. So they're bringing it back, and as a part of it, they're going to have membership levels, and one of the membership levels, guess what you get? Field and Stream Honor badge. So it's coming back. So, that's pretty good news for us. Thank you for watching. I appreciate you tuning in to the Shop Series. I'll be back with more fishing stuff next time we talk, and I'll see you then.